Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about why imperfect reps have no place in training. And I don't care whether your goals are maximum strength as a strength athlete. I don't care if your goals are physique oriented, right? On most of your exercises, with very few exceptions, there is no room for imperfect reps. Now, does that mean that you need to necessarily use the best technique every time? No, it doesn't mean you have to use the best leverages and best technique, but you better be doing perfect, consistent reps. But to go over to the point about technique, there's an old expression out there that says, I don't fear the man who knows 10,000 kicks. I fear the man who's done a single kick 10,000 times. Why? Because, well, people say practice makes perfect, but also practice makes permanent. So whether we're talking about muscle balance or we're talking about being able to hit 1 rep max in competition correctly, any of that, there are reasons why you want to do perfect reps. You don't want your reps to be grindy to where form breaks down. And if form breaks down, that's considered to be failure, right? You've reached muscle failure. In other words, at any point in a lift, if you're having to shift to the side under the weight to use compensatory strength, what does that tell you? You reached muscle failure. That means one side of your body is no longer strong enough. It means one side of your body is no longer strong enough to lift the weight. That's why you shift under the barbell, right? Whether it's a bench or an overhead press or whatever. When you shift or slide to the side load so that one side of the body can take over a little more, and that's the reason you do that, that means that you reached muscle failure. That means your weaker side has reached maximum fatigue. And so when you shift under it, what do? You create a strength imbalance because you're taking your strongest side and letting it do more of the work. Well, what happens when a stronger muscle does more work than a weaker muscle? Well, it grows even faster. It gets bigger and it gets even stronger, and it makes the muscle imbalance worse. And here's something I think most of us agree on. Unless you're in some sport to where you only use one limb at a time, most people generally want to be reasonably balanced in terms of your strength unilaterally. Why? Well, it's better for staying injury-free in a lot of sports. Also for guys who want to get jacked, guys who just want to look good. Let's say you're one of the guys training just to look good. Do you really want muscle imbalances? Do you want one of your arms bigger than the other? Do you want one of your triceps or one of your pecs or one of your delts to be bigger than the other? I would hope that guys who are chasing aesthetics don't, because then you're going to have to correct that imbalance. Well, why did you get that imbalance? By doing imperfect reps, by letting your form get really sloppy on that final rep so that you can grind harder and one side can work harder than the other, so that the stronger side can work harder than the other. It might be different if it was the weak side working harder than the other, like you found a way to do one more rep with your weak side and it to do a little more work. It might be different, but that's not what happens when form breaks down. A lot of times form breakdown is compensatory strength, oftentimes caused by being too loose. And that's another thing to think about. If you're too loose, if you're loose enough that you can grind to one side on an exercise and use extra compensatory strength, what does that tell you? Tells you you're probably not bracing hard enough. You're not ratcheted up tight enough. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you look at the information we have, plenty of coaches and experts talk about sometimes things like radiant effect and neuromuscular efficiency. When you're tighter, you have better neuromuscular efficiency. Well, what does that mean? It means you recruit more muscle fibers. If you recruit more muscle fibers on a given rep or given set, that has the potential, I'm not saying it's going to guarantee it, but it has the potential for more growth, more strength, right? I mean, ideally, we'd like our neuromuscular efficiency to be a little bit higher. That's the reason people wear belts, by the way, to improve neuromuscular efficiency, right? That's why you wear it. That's the purpose. You have something to brace your core against. Helps you get tighter through your core, which in turn can increase muscle fiber recruitment. So if you're so loose that you can shift and slide and grind and have sloppy, shitty form, getting less muscle fiber recruitment. Well, that's not ideal. That's not how you get bigger or stronger, right? You get bigger and you get stronger by recruiting and utilizing muscles, right? By doing work with the muscles, making the muscles actually work. That's how you get bigger and stronger. And then, of course, recovering and giving it fuel and rest and all of those things, right? That all ties in. But creating imbalances, not getting best muscle fiber recruitment, all of that goes hand in hand with using just poor form. And again, I'm not saying that you have to use perfect technique. There's a difference between perfect technique and using consistent, even form. There's a big difference, right? Good form is just using a good bar path, a consistent bar path. You know, and a lot of your technique goes out the window. Let's say, like you'll see in some of these, I'm doing a floor press instead of a closed grip bench. Well, the floor press takes some of your bench press technique out, doesn't it? Takes a lot of it out. You have to just brute strength that up. But it's even stricter. What does that tell you about brute strength? Sometimes just brute strength where your technique is forced out of the equation. You can't use leg drive, right? Because I'm using leg drive. Watch me there. I'm using leg drive. Can't do that on the floor press. You got to just press it from a dead stop with no leg drive. Well, you lose your technique on that, but it still makes you bigger and stronger. It's hard. It's hard. But it works. So that will still carry over to your bench press. It'll make you stronger at the bench press. It'll build your pecs. It'll build your triceps. So there's the muscle balance thing to consider. Then we come to the training effect, particularly on lifts that you care about. Well, what's the point of doing sloppy reps? In other words, if let's say your goal is to get stronger at a max, why would you ever use imperfect form in training? I'm not talking about in competition. Sometimes form breaks down in competition. You know, sometimes when you go to pull a max deadlift, a lifetime best deadlift in comp, maybe your back does round a little bit inappropriately. And if it does, by the way, you better have trained for that. You better have a hell of a strong core, right? If you do any cat back heavy deadlifting in comp, your core better be exceptionally strong or you're not going to be able to lock it. But I digress, back to the point. If you're practicing bad form in the gym, what do you think is going to give you more strength? What's going to give you a better effect when you're psyched up and in competition mode? You're going to do exactly what you do in the gym. And if you hit imperfect leverages and imperfect form because you've been practicing imperfect form, that's what you're going to do once you're psyched up and in competition. Well, is that going to make you get hurt? It depends on the exercise. It depends on the form breakdown. It could. In some cases, it can tremendously increase injury risk. In other cases, it won't, but you're going to lift less weight than you could. Let me ask you a question. Is either one of those desirable? When you go to a competition, do you want to lift less weight than you could? Probably not. Do you want to get hurt? Definitely not. So why would you train that way? Why would you train that way? Does anyone think that maxing out with bad form in the gym is going to make you better in competition? Even if you get away with a little form breakdown on your last attempt, attempting an all-time PR in comp, do you think training in that way is going to help you do better? No, it's going to make you do worse. It's going to cost you. Because everything with the hardest final attempt you do, if you do form breakdown at all, needs to be beautiful. It needs to be perfect. It needs to be perfect leverages in competition. And back to the point, we can argue about maxes in comp not being perfect, but there have also been guys who break world records who it looks like a warm-up, right? You guys ever seen that? Guys walk in and squat 900, 950 pounds in a meet, and it looks like a warm-up. It doesn't even look like a max, but it's a world record for their class. And I mean a big-ass world record. Sometimes it looks like a warm-up. Sometimes it looks like an opener. Sometimes you're like, man, that dude could lift 50 more pounds. He can't, because that is his all-out max. But he has his technique dialed in perfect. And he's not bleeding energy with energy leaks with bad form. And they're able to apply that. And we come back to the other point where people say, well, I could just use bad form to make it harder. Well, that's not ideal either, is it? I mean, using good form, even if that good form in some cases lets you lift a heavier weight, well, that's not a bad thing. I mean, if you can lift a heavier weight with good form, that's going to give you better overall size and strength, right? It's a good thing. So What I'm saying here is that you'll see people who will be in the gym and they'll have whatever excuses they have for using bad form, whether it's, well, I feel stronger, I'm lifting a heavier weight, or I feel that this is going to give me better development. I'm not talking about using a little bit of English on certain lifts because, you know, a push press is a specific lift. It's not bad form as long as it's consistent. You're using good bar paths. Sometimes using some body English on a row, it isn't necessarily bad form if you're consistent in the way you do it. But when we're talking about a lot of these other exercises that are relatively strict, like a bench press, perfect example, a squat, there's no room for that stuff. Bad form leads to uneven development. It leads to inconsistent strength gains. It leads to muscle imbalances. And it just teaches you bad habits that are going to hurt you in any endeavor if you're serious about your training, right? If you're serious about your training. And a lot of guys who say, hey, I just do this for fun, I do this for recreation, well, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Most people are going to do that. But you should probably get the most out of your training, right? If you're going to show up and you're going to train and you're going to put in the work and you're going to bust your ass, you might as well get the most out of it, right? All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.